Hey guys, welcome back. So, this is going to be part two of our recent conversation on the new tax law that has recently been passed. If you haven't listened to the first part, make sure to check that out. Today, we're going to be covering several things. There's a lot in this new tax bill, but we're going to cover what we've determined are some of the most relevant points. So, today, we're going to be getting into things like the new Trump accounts, changes to the 529 plans, and HSA changes. We'll also talk about tips and overtime income and how it might or might not affect physicians, in particular physicians in training. So we're going to dive into that here in part two today. Welcome to Finance for Physicians, the show where we help physicians like you use money as a tool to live a great life. I'm your host, Daniel Wren, and I've spent the last decade advising physicians on their personal finances, with the mission to help them understand that taking control of their finances now means creating a future where they can practice medicine where, when, and how long they want to. All right, who's talking about the QBI? Is this me talking about this one, or do we have a volunteer?
Oh, would you like to talk about it, Daniel?
I just don't see
You
a
just
name
sound
next
so
to it.
excited
He
about it,
does.
Daniel.
I think you set yourself up for this.
Yeah. Don't
And-
disappoint us now.
Yeah. Well, the QBI thing, this is not relevant unless you're a business owner. So a private practice, say you're a partner in a private practice, or even if you're an independent contractor, like a lot of emergency medicine, for example, or locums jobs are 1099. So independent contractors. So this change is relevant for that crowd. So if you guys are in that boat, it's a potentially a slightly better setup. So basically, there's this deduction you can take, an extra deduction on top of everything we've already talked about, where if you're a self-employed person or a business owner, so it's 20% of what the QBI, that's what QBI stands for, is qualified business income, which is its own calculation we're not going to go into. But when you have this QBI income, which is most of the time the scenarios which I've already mentioned, you're able to deduct another 20% of that income. So that's a really good incentive for business owners. But there's some limitations on service businesses. So physicians are in that boat of a service business. So it limits the deductibility of that for service businesses. And it's a phase out range. So if you make above a certain threshold, if let's say you're a physician that owns a practice and you make $1 million a year, you can't deduct any QBI ever. And you wouldn't have been able to before, and you won't be able to after. On the other hand, let's say you're more like 500,000. Yeah, that's the big difference. So 394 to 494 was what it was before, instead of 100. So that's $100,000. So if you were making 394 to 494 and you have a business, that would be the period of income where you're less able to take this deduction. So if you're above 494, you can't take any of it. So what the OBBBA, ABBA, I'm going to start using Jeff's ABBA, did was that was going to phase out. That was going to sunset. Is that the right word? As well. That was going to go away as well. That was set to expire. There we go. Next year as well. So that this new tax law extended that, or made it permanent. And so that part is a big thing if you're eligible for it. And then the other thing it did is it increased the phase out from 100 to 150,000 for married couple, or from 50 to 75 for a single. So that's a big deal if you're in that sweet spot. So I was throwing out 500,000 as an example, as a private practice. If you're in the income level of around 500,000, that can have a major impact because it's now 395 to 540 something.
544 600.
Yeah. So it's $50,000 more. So if you happen to be in that range, that's a big deal because you're now getting it. So it'll also, it basically just increases the number of people that are eligible for QBI because of that 50,000 tack on. And I think it's particularly impactful for physicians because that's probably, in our experience, like the average income range for a lot of people. Now, if you're above it, like I said at the beginning, this has no effect. You weren't getting it before, you're not going to get it after. So if your income's above the 550-ish range, this is not really important for you. But for those of you guys that are in that phase out range, it can be a big deal. And I would definitely look into it, read up on it so you understand it. QBI. That's QBI. Opportunity zone, that's on here too. I don't know if we need to get into that. That's a they made the tax incentives for investing in opportunity zone real estate deals. They sweeten that pot. So that's its own podcast for sure. But if you're interested in that, I would read up on that as well. Okay, so tips, no tax on tips. Who's got no tax on tips, overtime?
Oh, well, I will address that one, but it's not quite no tax on tips. So for those of you who have the time and energy for a side gig that might include income from tips, or a spouse perhaps who's working in a job that might get tips, just to clarify, tips are still subject to payroll tax. They are still included in adjusted gross income. They may still be subject to state income tax, but there is now a below the line deduction for up to 25,000 of what's considered qualified tip income. So they do have to meet certain criteria. Again, this is one of those where there's a phase out starting at 150,000 for single and head of household filers, and then 300,000 for joint filers. So not exactly no tax on tips, but it is a step towards for qualified tip income being able to deduct some of that income.
Will you be financial planning for tips now?
Heather's now accepting tips effectively.
I don't think that would meet the criteria, guys.
I was reading that a little closer, and apparently certain service businesses are excluded from getting this.
Precisely.
We're not eligible. And I think physicians aren't either. So
yeah.
Oh, that would be better. Medicine
not
for
you can
tips.
no, which is, it's a creative idea, but I'm sure you'll be seeing more people that are now accepting, like it's already become a big tip. Like during COVID, everybody decided to start accepting tips, which it's kind of its own thing, but I would expect that to just only get more prevalent. Like everybody's going to want to accept tips now, especially because there's that extra tax benefit from doing so. So,
well, again, it needs to meet certain criteria. So you have to dig a little bit deeper into what the bill says. But for those of you that are in more traditional tip earning jobs, or your spouse might be, again, those of you who are in healthcare who probably don't have time or energy for such a side gig. But for those of you who do meet that, or somebody else in your household meets that, something to keep on track for. Mm-hmm.
The overtime thing might be more relevant potentially, but I'm having a hard time coming up. I think so with residents and fellows, obviously that would be an overtime situation, but I believe that they're like excluded from getting any overtime benefits in most cases, which is a bummer.
Right. Yeah. Well, and this one too is even with what is considered quote unquote overtime compensation. The key here is that, again, this is a below the line deduction. It's kind of similar to the tips. There is still tax on this income, and the amount of that varies based on your filing status, but it does have the same phase outs as the tips deduction. But the key here is that it applies specifically to the overtime income that is above your normal rate. So if you're doing overtime, the amount that you get paid for that overtime, we're not talking about the total amount of that overtime pay. We're saying it's what's over what would have been your normal rate for that overtime pay. So that's just like to keep in mind.
So if you get paid $50 an hour, for example, normally, and then you do some overtime shifts and they're $100 an hour, you would only get to deduct the $50 part, like the difference between the two?
Exactly. It's the difference between the two. So instead of the full $100 per hour,
Well,
it's just $50 per hour over your normal $50 rate.
What was the phase out on that one?
So it's the same as the tips one. So it's 150,000 for single and head of household and 300,000 for joint filers.
Okay. So there's probably a fair amount of people listening that would be potentially impacted by the overtime thing, not in training, but in practice, if your income is below that level or around that level or below. Because, I know some physicians get overtime compensation. So, and maybe that's more incentive to negotiate overtime compensation, because I know most physicians I know work a ton of overtime and maybe they're not paid on it exactly fairly, or it's not delineated as overtime.
Sure. Well, as we were talking about with the tips, I would think that this is one of those that we're probably going to see some ramifications coming in the future for how, like you said, salaries are negotiated, how things are paid out. I'm sure businesses are going to be keeping this in mind as well, as far as incentives for those that they're hiring.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any others on your end, Heather?
Yeah, there was one other special circumstance that I wanted to just do a quick shout about, and that's for our military doctors. Shout out to those of you who are in the service. Thank you for your service. For those of you that are active duty, one thing to note is that this bill does increase your BAH, so your base allowance for housing. So those rates are going up. There's also specifically for doctors in the military, that there's supposed to be increased funding for military healthcare. Now, it remains to be seen how that might play out for military doctors and their income, but I am interested to see if our military doctors experience a raise as a result of the increased funding for military healthcare. So fingers crossed that that is the case.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. The long-awaited next topic. Jeff gets to cover. And this is this could be free money kind of thing. Like there's some free money to be had here in the Trump accounts. But there's lots of pros and cons, more cons than pros. It's not quite as well, I'll let Jeff share. Tell us about Trump accounts, Jeff.
Yes, Trump accounts, or also known as MAGA accounts. So the acronym here comes from Money Account for Growth and Advancement.
I love
MAGA.
acronyms.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've heard that acronym used somewhere else too.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So I've seen people with hats that love these accounts. And so anyway, but Trump account, MAGA account, whatever, acronym you want to go with there, or how you want to call it. This is the idea of an account for kids that parents can contribute to, employers can contribute to, up to $5,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is that it's an additional savings vehicle to set people up for things that, traditionally we think of 529s and education as a big thing that we save in, but this has some qualified expenses, like you can use it for your first home or some other things like that, where if you use it for these qualified expenses, it would get long-term capital gains tax rates applied to it on the growth that you used in there. Otherwise, you're paying regular tax rates on growth.
They needed to consult us before they created this.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's actually a really bad account, the way it's structured, because
ordinary income tax.
I mean, so if you
Jeff, can you deduct tax for what you contribute?
No.
Right.
No, it grows tax free. It can be invested in index funds, U.S. index funds. So that's maybe a pro for those.
And they give you the money.
Wait. You're limited to how you can invest it. But
it's not bad. That's good.
Yeah,
that's index funds.
I think we would say that's a pro. But,
okay.
Depending on your investment philosophy.
If you want to buy crypto, that's a downside.
I can only use the S&P 500 or other things like
Okay.
that, like something
Okay.
like that. And so the reason why I'm just like, wow, this makes me want to throw up a little bit.
Yeah, but
Is
tell us about the
because,
free money, though.
well, I'll get to the free money. Show me the money. I'll get to the money. But there's already an account. You can open a brokerage like anywhere. And you know what, Daniel? If you put money into that brokerage account and it grows, and then you sell it later, at least a year later, you get long-term capital gains rates on it. And it doesn't matter what you took it out for.
That's the big fumble on this creation of this. Either they were ignorant about this, or they just are trying to pull one over on people. That doesn't make any sense that they would. It already exists. And there's less limitations on it. This has lots of limitations on it.
Yeah. So it's like you had an account that already did this with no limitations, and now you add restrictions, and now you pay. I guess maybe it's an income producing thing for the government, so it made the reconciliation bill work out better for the numbers. But all that to say, so there's not a whole lot of great news with this account right now. The interesting part is for kids born in 2025, 2026, and 2027, the government will seed that account with $1,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a winner. Might as well take advantage of that. Might as well.
Yes, I would say if you have a kid in those years, don't turn down $1,000 that can be invested in
what were the years 500? Again?
2025, 2026, and 2027. So even earlier in the year in 2025 is fine.
Yeah, I missed that.
Yep. Again, hey, here's more incentive.
There's still time, Daniel.
Yeah.
There's still time.
And so anyway, yeah, if you have a kid that's born in those years, absolutely take $1,000, invest it in the S&P 500 or VTSAX, something like that. This isn't investment advice, right? But some of the options that are available there, and there's no reason not to at that point.
I wanted to take a quick break to share some exciting news. Our new course, Vitals Check, Your Money Game Plan for Post-Residency Life, is now live. If you're finishing training or just getting started as an attending, this course is for you. It's taught by me and my team, the same financial planners you've been hearing from on the podcast. We'll be walking through big money decisions you're facing right now. Things like what to do with your student loans, or how to make smart housing decisions, and where to start investing. You'll also gain access to proven tools and templates that will help you set goals, track your money, and build a plan that fits your life. And just for listening to this podcast, you can get 50% off if you sign up by August 31st. Just make sure to use the code podcast at checkout. You can register now at financeforphysicians.co, and we'll make sure to include the course link in the show notes. I read an article about talk like they were going to try to make it so that it was able to be transferred into an IRA when they turn 18. That would change the game on it if that was a Roth IRA. I mean,
yeah,
that would change the game.
Mm-hmm. But so, that's not written in at this point.
It's not clarified. But there's talk that could be, a fine point that gets ironed out. So that would make it a lot. So stay tuned about the Trump accounts. There's potential, maybe, for some improvements, possibly. Because otherwise, right now, the way we're looking at it is we're like, what's the point of this thing? Like, there's no special benefit compared to what alternatively we could do. We could accomplish the exact same thing, aside from the $1,000 free money. We can accomplish the exact same thing with less limitations. So there would be no reason to do the Trump account on the surface without the $1,000. So my expectation is that there's something that, or else it's going to fail. Like nobody's going to do them unless they have some additional carrot involved.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
Yes. Back to that money in the bill, I mentioned it could make money for the government if they get more taxes off of it. But that is that speculation, is that creating this as a Roth type of an account was too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
too much expense to add to the bill for it to qualify, or a piece of that to qualify as a reconciliation bill, which go ask ChatGPT about what a reconciliation bill is and why it's all this way. But so yes, if you are speculative, maybe instead of gambling we didn't even get to that. Maybe instead of gambling, you could gamble by putting money into a Trump account and hope it turns into a Roth down the road.
Yeah. Or better yet, just stay tuned. And when it becomes clarified, we will be the first to report. And then we might be a little more excited about the Trump accounts. But for now, we're not so excited about it unless you have the $1,000 free money. There's some employer provisions too that look a little, I'm a little curious about, like the ability to fund it through employers. That really would look good if they did the raw thing, but right now, no. Anyway,
missed opportunities.
Yeah. Anyway, so all right, 529s. Heather.
Yes, 529 plans. All right, so I am excited about this, and I hope a lot of our listeners will be as well. So as of the passing of the bill, which was on July 4th of this year, there's now an expanded list of qualified K through 12 expenses. So previously, it was just tuition and just $10,000 worth of tuition that you could withdraw from a 529 account for each child per year that would fit under the qualified expenses list. But as of the passing of the bill, that has been expanded to some more things that might be of interest, especially for those that are prepping for college. So these are going to be things like textbooks, online instructional materials, and tutoring outside the home. Has to meet certain qualifications, but that could be a very good one. Also, fees for standardized tests. So I'm thinking of those of you who have to pay for like AP and college admission exams. Those will now qualify. Also, dual enrollment fees for college courses that are taken while kids are still in high school. And then there's also educational therapy costs for students with disabilities. Those will now qualify as well. That would be for things like occupational or behavioral, physical, speech therapies, that kind of thing. Those will also qualify. And then just to recap the timing of it, again, as long as the distributions from the 529s for these new expanded expenses happen after July 4th of this year, you can still claim them for this year. And then starting next year in 2026, the limit, again, for K through 12 expenses is increasing from 10,000 to 20,000. So those of you that are feeling the pinch on the private school tuition, for example, that is exceeding that 10K limit each year, good news for you. It's going to be increasing to 20,000 per year per child starting next year in 2026. And then for those of you that are paying more attention to your children who are out of high school, looking at post-secondary education expenses, and actually some of our listeners themselves, adults, 529 qualified expenses now include credentialing expenses. So these are going to be things that are other than a traditional four-year college education type expense. Things like tuition fees, books, exam fees for continuing education, fees for any credential. And this is for any industry recognized credentialing, those that are accredited by major credentialing organizations. It also includes apprenticeships that are recognized by the Department of Labor, and also occupational licenses that are issued and recognized by the federal government. So we may actually have some listeners who are adults, but who may actually be incurring some of these continuing education or credentialing expenses themselves, might still have their 529 plan with a little bit of money left over. So that's just something to know. But also for those of you that are thinking through for your kids, maybe something that is an alternate to a more traditional four-year college education. Again, these expenses that are going to be qualified have expanded to credentialing expenses. So that's some good news.
Yeah. So if I'm thinking about this and I have young kids, I think the biggest objection people have to funding 529s, or even I would say I have, is that the limitations on it. And I don't know what the future is going to hold. And I don't know how much education is going to cost.
Mhm.
What if they don't even go to traditional college? So basically, this opens up even further the categories of the things you can use a 529 for. So, for example, if you're already sending your kids to private school and it's pretty expensive, um, that in itself just adds on to the reasoning for funding 529. So basically, the incentive to fund 529s is increased pretty substantially
Yes.
for people, and
The flexibility and use
the
really.
flexibility is very, very expanded,
Yeah.
very much expanded. And I would expect them. I'm much, much more favorable. Just in the past, I don't know how long it's been, 10 years. It's gone from like undergrad tuition room and board to now K through 12 up to 10,000 a year to now K through 12, 20,000 a year plus all these other things. So 529s are getting much, much more generous, which I'm a big fan of. I think that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
if you guys are not already funding them aggressively, I would be looking into 529s if you expect to have any of those types of expenses in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
HSA changes. I guess this is me. I was excited about the HSA changes.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
not, it wasn't quite as good. I think there was some talk of increasing the HSA limits for a minute, but that didn't end up coming through on
Sadly.
contributions to HSAs. So that's not changed. What's changed, this is going to be really good for those of you that are involved in cash pay concierge or direct pay practices. And so prior to this new rule, technically you could not use an HSA to pay for your direct care subscription or concierge subscription. And in fact, actually, if you went to a direct care physician or concierge, you weren't eligible to fund HSA accounts. So that's been um, a little bit of a disputed area. I know of some direct care physicians that were like, no, people pay with their HSAs all the time already, and fund HSAs already. And accountants were a little bit in dispute about this. So I think there was some gray area with that, but this makes it very concrete that you can for sure use HSAs to fund direct care subscriptions, and it does not disqualify you because the old rules kind of like considered direct care as like insurance. And so that's been cleared up where it does not disqualify you from being able to fund an HSA either. So if I had a direct care practice or was involved in one, I would really want to utilize that as part of marketing. I would want to talk to your accountant always on this kind of thing and make sure you're 100% zipped up and clear on that. And even if I did talk to my accountant and I was advertising and mentioning something like that in my advertising, I would still want to say consult your accountant because you have to be careful when you're talking about that. But that definitely makes it much more appealing to the average person that has an HSA to go hire a direct care physician. And I would want to put that out there so that people are aware of that. So also, if you're going to a direct care provider, you can think about that as a qualified HSA expense. Or if you've listened to our shows in the past, we typically advise like letting your HSA build up because it's such a good tax shelter. So if you're doing that strategy, you can save your receipts from your direct care physician and like put them in the file. And then that's like a golden ticket to be able to, at any point in time, whenever you decide, pull the money out of your HSA to kind of offset that without any tax. So all good
true
stuff.
story. I've had 4 kids, an emergency room visit, and some dental work worth of expenses piling up in my HSA that I can take out later tax free. Woo!
At any point in time, right?
At any point in time. So
yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have the dental work in the emergency room visit, but
Yeah.
Silver linings, though.
Yeah.
Yep. They add up.
If only I had direct primary care, I wouldn't have needed it, probably.
should look into it, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yes. We need
All right.
one of you providers to join me in Northeast Ohio.
That's right. That's right.
There's not as many as you would think. We work with, as you guys know, we work with physicians, and we hear a lot of people talking like they're considering going that direction. One side note, while we're talking about it, I expect this new tax bill to further reduce reimbursements. We're not really getting into that for today, but I've already heard people talking about that, like physicians that own practices especially. And I've already heard like an even greater kind of push towards considering cash pay alternatives like direct care. So I would expect this, as this all rolls through, to further incentivize especially primary care or like non-surgical type practices to move towards that cash pay alternative. I think that's inevitable. It's one of the unintended consequences, I would say, but time will tell. We'll see.
Yeah. Things to watch.
Yes. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to talk about the student loans, and I believe as this gets put out to you guys, we'll be covering the student loan episode next after this. So you can look forward to that. There's lots of changes with the student loans. So Thanks, guys, for joining me to talk through all this. Hopefully we've made tax changes not so boring, but
hopefully
they were big and beautiful.
We've made them one big, beautiful conversation, and that's all I got.
That sounds like a title.
Yes, it could be. All right, guys, I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.
No guests or clients appearing on the podcast received any form of compensation for their appearance and obtained no other benefit from us. It should not be assumed that every client has had the same experience.